Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Commander's Brew. You know us, we're out here building weird, wild new decks. This one's no different. It's Cody, Vociferous Codex, brand new Commander deck from Strixhaven. Check it out. All right, here we go. This is a very fun deck, straight out of the new cards from the booster packs of Strixhaven. So not the Commander deck stuff yet. We're going to be dealing with that next week. We'll be talking about lots of those cards, probably brewing with them in the coming weeks. But right now we're still talking about one of the more exciting, kind of weird new cards out of Strixhaven, and that is Cody, Vociferous Codex. So let's just read Cody pretty early on in here, and that way we can get an idea of where we were coming from with this one. Cody is a 3-mana legendary artifact creature, 3 generic, of course. It's a construct, it's a 1/4. You can't cast permanent spells, says Cody.
Wild.
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 Also, I'll take this, before we go any further, I'll take this time to just pause and say, I love the art on Cody. It's like this little, like, zoomed in little book with a little eye, and he's got his little, like, artifact kind of like tentacle leg things. And I love how, like, the background's out of focus. So it makes you feel like he's, like, kind of small, you know?
Yeah.
It's really cool. Really neat. So he's a cute little guy. But here's his big ability. 4 and tap. Add Wooburg. Add 5 of one of each color. When you cast your next spell this turn, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile an instant or sorcery card of... I lost my place there. Instant or sorcery card with lesser mana value. Until the turn, you can cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put each other card exiled this way on the bottom of your library in a random order. So it's Cascade, essentially. But for instance, in sorceries only. And of course, since we won't be casting permanent spells with Cody on the battlefield, the only things we can cast to trigger it are instant or sorcery spells. So this puts a pretty massive restriction on what we can do with Cody, while also rewarding us for playing with that restriction. Now, this isn't to say that when you're thinking of building a Cody deck that you can't build something with permanence in it, because strictly, you know, that only applies when Cody's on the battlefield. You don't need to have Cody on the battlefield right on turn 3, depending on what you're doing. But so yeah, Cody, Vociferous Codex, works well with permanence and without. So just keep that in mind. It's just that once this little guy's out there, that's when the restrictions start popping in and things become a little harder. But if you did what we did, which was we built around basically having Cody as like part of our combo that we have to set up a lot first. But we have Cody in the command zone to make it work. So we're not too worried about this restriction of the permanent thing. So you're going to find out what we're doing with Cody, because we went in with our patrons in our Discord. We talked about some different angles and stuff like that. And we landed on one that I liked a lot. Some of the other ones you can check out in the Lost Cards, which will be coming out on Thursday on YouTube. But just to kind of give you an idea before I say the actual words, what's our companion, Sean?
Our companion is Zerta, the Dawn Waker. 1 and hybrid borrows, 3 CMC mana value for a 3/3 elemental fox. And for this to be our companion, each permanent in our starting deck has an activated ability. And then what Zerta does for you is abilities you activate that aren't mana abilities cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana that is cost to less than 1 mana. 1 tap, target creature can't block this turn. Whoa. This is a wild idea. I love it.
So, any guesses right now? I'll just tell you it's cycling. We're going to build a deck around cycling to get to our ultimate goal using Cody, which, stick around, we're going to find out. So, we do have a big-time cycling deck here. So, we've got creatures that we can't cast if Cody's out, but we can cycle them. And, in fact, we want to cycle them actually even before Cody's out. So, it actually works well no matter which kind of way you're coming at this, right? So in this kind of setting the scene, the things we're going to have to be working with here is a lot of cycling. We want to fill that graveyard up. We want to be drawing cards with our cycling cards, hitting our land drops, all those great things that cycling cards do. So
That's an amazing way around the restriction.
Yeah, right. So we can still include these cards in and still have them have value even if we can't cast them.
Oh
So
wow.
Zerda's great. Zerda really helps us a lot with the cycling costs on things, because don't forget, like, there's tons of cycling in Magic's history. We're not talking about just Ikoria cards. There's stuff from before Ikoria that costs way more than 1 and the 2 that we're kind of used to. So Zerda really gives us a nice discount on those cards, especially. Just just some of the creatures that we have included in here. Yadaro, Wandering Monster, the 5 red legendary dinosaur turtle, the 8/8 trample haste, cycling for 1 and a red. Probably used to this one. This is like majorly just a cycling card, really. But I thought it was a good example of like a card that we're going to be running in here. When we cycle them, shuffle them into your library from your graveyard. If you've cycled a card named Yadaro 4 or more times this game, put them onto the battlefield from your graveyard instead. So, like, again, this is basically going to be like a single red for cycling. That's great. That's fine. Titanoth Rex from the same set, 7 green. Oh, by the way, basically impossible to get that 4 thing going with Yadaro, so don't even worry about it.
Oh,
if you
yeah.
get it, it's great, but don't worry about it. Titanoth Rex, 7 green for the 11/11 with trample, cycling for 1 and a green. When you cycle it, you put a trample counter on target creature you control. This is great. And then, we have Drannith Stinger. There's two different Drannith ones, but Drannith Stinger is 1 and a red. Whenever we cycle another card, Drannith Stinger deals 1 damage to each opponent, and cycling is just a 1 on this guy. It's a 2/2. So these are just some classic cyclers. These are some of the more recent ones, obviously. These have additional abilities, but we are running basically some vanilla creatures in this deck, maybe French vanilla, maybe some big tramplers.
I mean, they have to have an activated ability.
Right, they all have cycling. But we're cool with just if a creature has cycling. Like, that was the base right here, right? So as you'll see, there's if you look at the deck list, you're going to see some like pretty basic looking creatures that are included because they have cycling and because of the part 2, and we'll get to that in the neat moves. But one of the things I wanted to touch on before we get into those neat moves is another kind of side of this, right? And we want to be pulling lands out of our deck, because the thing is with cycling is you get a lot of lands. So we've got a lot of the cycling lands in here, but just pulling out the basics is really nice. So this is one of our old tricks here on Commander's Brew. We run cards like these, Sean.
Oh, Attune with Ether, single green for a sorcery, search up a basic, put it into your hand. You also get 2 energy. I'm assuming that doesn't matter for this deck. Caravan Vigil, single green sorcery, search up a basic, put it in your hand. But if Morbid happened, if something died, you get to put it onto the battlefield.
Simple.
Swords, yeah. So all of those kind of, there's dozens. Well, there's not dozens, but I think there's we're up to 5 or 6. They've been very generous to give us these single mana, tutor up a basic into your hand. And when I put decks together where I really want to squeeze out lands, this allows me to like run fewer lands to begin with, as long as you're heavy green. So not only am I drawing fewer lands later, if that's the goal, I'm not having any trouble as long as you go heavy on the green, because all you need is 1 green to get this whole thing rolling.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's exactly what's going on here. So we're using these, we're pulling our lands out. We have a low land count to begin with, so you can kind of almost, these are like lands you kind of have to pay for. But as long as you have 1 green, it's fine. Trust me, it's going to work out. So we've included a bunch of those. They're all 1 mana, and that is something that's important to keep in mind as we go into our any moves.
We're just going to take a second to handle a little bit of business. And the main point is, thanks for watching. If you want to see more of our comedic takes and offbeat decks, consider subscribing to our channel and hitting that bell to make sure you don't miss anything. And if you're loving our stuff and want to support further, the best way is to head over to patreon.com/commandersbrew. Find out how our generous patrons keep our show growing and how you can get in on the brewing action too through our Discord. Or, if you'd rather, just hang out and play some games with like-minded Commander players. Now, let's get back to those any-to-me moves.
Working on a
Neat.
All right, so remember what I was just talking about. We got some 1 mana sorceries. We got a bunch of cycling creatures in the graveyard. Well, this is where our dear Cody comes into play, because what we want to do is we want to be cycle everything we can. Get as many creatures into the graveyard as possible. Draw a bunch of cards. Let's have some nice mana ready. Have a couple spells, whatever. Then we cast Cody. We, give him his turns because obviously he's got. We actually have a couple things in this deck that allow haste. Very important, actually. Some haste enablers. When looking for these, you're going to have to find some ones that have activated abilities on them, right? If they're enchantments, you're going to use that.
Oh yeah.
So if you can do that, and we can get Cody to do his thing right away, great. If not, wait for a turn, and then here's what happens: cast Cody, do his thing, make the Wooburg, pay 1 mana for something like either one, maybe it's one of those green land searchers, or perhaps it's like a Swords to Plowshares if you want to get a little extra value out of it and kill something good. But it's important that it's 1 mana, because then it will search our entire deck, basically. It'll go through until it finds a card with an instant or sorcery with less CMC than 1, and it will find Living End, which is the sorcery with suspend 3, 2 black, but it has no CMC or no mana value, 0 mana value. Each player exiles all creature cards from their graveyard, then sacrifices all creatures they control, then puts all cards they exiled this way onto the battlefield. So we flip our hit. It's Living Death, but it's it's the suspend version. We flip it. All of those cycled creatures come from our graveyard. They come back again. If we have one of those haste enablers, perfect. It's actually one of the things we want to find really badly in the deck. And then we get it out and we do it, and there we go. Now we have a huge board, and our opponents, whatever they're doing is fine. And this is why we're just totally happy putting kind of like French vanilla big cycling creatures, like 6/6s with trample, and like weird 7/5s from like our from like Apocalypse or whatever set it was. That was, you know what I mean? Like,
that's fun.
Those are all fine because they just come out as big chonkers, and it's really fun. And then of course there's some that do more fun things, but that's the plan.
I love it.
Yeah, and it's really cool because it really is. It's totally reliable. There's no way you can't hit it. As long as you're casting your 1 CMC card, you're going to hit Living End if you do the Cody thing. And I feel like your opponents are going to be like, "What are you doing?" You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? But
this is so cool.
Let's talk about some of the other stuff that we can do, because that is definitely our main crux of the deck. That's what we're trying to do. That's our end game almost. There's a lot in between there, right? And like I said, Cody's not going to be on the battlefield right from the beginning, because obviously that really nerfs our way to do things. Sometimes you're just going to play those big creatures with cycling. We're going to play them because we're going to need to block or something like that. That's totally fine. Right. But there's some cool, neat moves here, Sean.
This one looks...
take a look at this one. This one's fun.
Yeah, this one's wild. So we're going to cast Cody. Cody's out. We're doing some cycling. Now we're going to cast a sorcery. Fractured Identity, 3 white, blue. Exile target non-land permanent. That's Cody. Each player, other than its controller, creates a token that's a copy of it. So now everyone has a Cody, and they're not allowed to cast permanents.
Yeah, right? And we're giving them this weird cascade ability, but I think it's worth it for just stopping them from playing permanents.
That's so funny. I love it.
Fractured Identity is just a good card anyway, so it's okay. And one of the things when you're building a deck like this that I have to keep reminding myself, okay, is I was all about the 1 CMC to make that combo work, to make this work. Can't include anything more, because what if we cast that and do it and it doesn't hit? It's wait a second, I just don't have to activate Cody. It's fine. We can have things at other costs. It's just that with the 1, we know what we're doing, right? So this one's fun. No matter which side you're coming from, it's a real effective and good card in the deck.
True.
There's a whole other deck with Cody where we are untapping him and trying to generate mana. I'm sure there's ways that we can do it where we he taps for 4, or we pay 4 to tap him and he taps for 5. That generates 1 mana. Well, if we can untap him for free, that becomes a mana generator, and if we can do that repeatedly, then we're getting somewhere. Well, Vizier of Tumbling Sands is an interesting card that probably goes in that deck, and is still effective in this deck actually. So 2 and a blue, it's a human cleric, 1/3, tap to untap another target permanent, and it also has cycling for 1 and a blue, very good there. And whenever we cycle the Vizier, we untap a target permanent. So This could be Cody. We can still get some added value out of doing something with some of our other instants and sorceries if we really want. If we even just want to like somehow generate an extra mana or two, this can work sometimes depending on what we've got going on. But it's still just a good card to include, and it's just a creature with cycling. That's totally fine.
So I noticed you've got a couple cards here for the unlikely event that Living End ends up in your hand or your graveyard. We've got Memory's Journey, 1 and a blue for an instant. Target player shuffles up to 3 target cards from their graveyard into their library, and it flashes back for a single green. Nice. Mm-hmm. And Survivor of the Unseen, 2 and a blue. Human Wizard, 2/1. Cumulative upkeep of 2.
That's a lot.
Tap, draw 2 cards, then put a card from your hand on top of your library. That would be Living End if we're looking for that. We would do that just before we cast our 1 with Cody's mana in order to cascade right into it, which is on top.
Yeah. Or I guess if we for some reason got that early and we could maybe hold on to like an Evolving Wilds or something, crack it, do like a brainstorm type thing here. Basically I just wanted a little backup because when I was testing this as well as I could, I was testing it in Forge, and I didn't actually have Cody to do the combo, but I could like test everything in between, like to getting to it, you know what I mean? So there were some games where like I was probably playing against a mill deck, and I milled my Living End, and I'm like, oh crap, what am I going to do now? So I was like, okay, so I do need some kind of a way to get that out of there. And then Survivor was just a nice little backup for a brainstorm effect, or as you'll see in the budget report, if you got a scroll rack, great, but if not, this does like a reasonable enough impression of something like that. When we're talking about cycling, we would absolutely be in big time trouble if we didn't talk about Astral Drift. This card is a house in this deck, 2 and a white for an enchantment that says whenever you cycle Astral Drift or cycle another card while Astral Drift is on the battlefield, you may exile target creature. If you do, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Here's why this is so good, and it has cycling for 2 and a white. This card is so good because if we do get into a spot where we've done our thing with Cody and Cody's on the battlefield, and now we can't cast any more permanents, and we're not just winning right away, which is very possible. Astral Drift can blink our Cody out. We can play a creature or whatever, and then have him come back in and still be doing his thing. Or in the more, I think, likely scenario where we're defending on our way to getting our combo sort of set up, Astral Drift just blinks out creatures that attack you. You know, they're sending stuff your way. Okay, fine. I'll just do a quick cycle, bounce that thing, like it goes and then comes back. Like, really, really important card in this deck, I would say.
Yeah, I like it.
The one, read the one that's before this in the notes. I'll pull it up here.
Oh yeah, this is Tectonic Reformation. This is the one I thought of when, this card was a blessing. Yeah. So 1 and a red enchantment. It has cycling 2, so it's valid with Zirda. Each land card in your hand has cycling for a single red, right? Any storm type of decks, cantrippy decks where you're like, oh, I got so many lands in my hand, I just can't get through them fast enough because of the way I've built my draw engine. It's like, it was a perfect way to just be like, great, keep it rolling. They're all cycling lands now, which is amazing. Yeah, who even cares if I got too many lands? I'm gonna keep cycling stuff's astral drifting things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, definitely, right? Only downside that Tectonic Reformation kind of ends up bringing to your deck is that you end up wanting to skew even a little more red. We're already talking about maybe skewing a little towards green, which is fine, but now you also want to include a little more red because that single red cycling for lands is really good. Although, you know, generally speaking, it's not like you need to go super heavy, so you can just include a slightly more skew towards red, and I think you're okay. I think it works. It's a great card. You got to have it. I love that it has cycling itself, or we wouldn't be able to have it in the deck with Zirda. So yeah, this is it. I mean, this is what we're doing. You know,
nice.
Yeah,
That's so fun, Andy. This is a great one.
It's simple, but there's a lot of decision points along the way. Surprisingly, like we talked about it in the in the Discord, and we talked about like, is this a little too on rails? You know what I mean? Like we're doing this thing until we get to do this thing, and then bam, that's how it happens. But the games don't really play out that way. We're playing a 4-player game of Commander, and you're just sitting there cycling. Well, you're never going to have any defense. No one's going to attack you. Of course they are. So you end up having to make lots of decisions about playing creatures. Am I going to do Cody for smaller value? If I get my Memory's Journey, like that means we can do Cody and the Living End thing a few times actually, right? So we might be able to cast it, put it back in our library, do it again, and then it's going to be in there. We can flash it back. That card actually becomes really good if you do this kind of, we're not just saving up for one big activation, but we got to do a couple on the way. And depending on what you have in your graveyard, it really works. I think even, and now this is something that I haven't, I just thought about before we started recording, but Yadaro, when you cycle Yadaro, shuffle it into your library from your graveyard. Is there any moment where you can get Yadaro back in like an instant, like if it was at instant speed?
I would think so. I mean, because I'm making an assumption here. I don't know for sure, but if it shuffles in from your graveyard, that means it. I assume that
is it all the one thing, like?
You would cycle it first, and then the additional trigger would go on the stack of you drawing a card and shuffling it in. I mean, how is it written? I don't think the shuffling is part of the cycling.
I think it might be.
When you cycle, when is a trigger? Right? Yeah. So it goes on the stack. So it's in your graveyard. You've cycled. You've not yet drawn a card. You've not yet shuffled Yadaro. If you do an instant thing and hit your Living End, you'd get Yadaro out.
Okay, well that's sweet. So if that is in fact the case, which I mean sounds to me like it's possible, that's a nice little move. And there's a number of 1-mana things that are instant in our deck, so that's nice.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, you can just doing it to even just get something like a Yadaro or 1 or 2 creatures that are really big can be really, really great in this deck. So I'm kind of reminded a little bit of the Nethroi Zeros to Heroes deck, right? Where the whole thing is like put a bunch of cards in graveyard, do a Nethroi, get them all back. Well, there's actually a lot of value in just getting 2 or 3 or even 4 back, not getting necessarily like 10 or 20. You know what I mean?
Right.
You'll be impressed and happy with getting 3, 8, 8, 11, and 1 like 11, 11. You know what I mean? Like two big ones and 1 really big one or something like that. Like you're going to be pleased with that for the most part. So
yeah, can I get 2 big ones, 1 really big one, large fry, and a Diet Coke?
Absolutely. So yeah, there's a lot of decision points on the way. It's absolutely not on rails, and actually it's kind of weirdly fun to be like cycle. Like it's really because your opponents are just kind of like, I don't know what you're doing, but I don't like it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Discord helpers for a second here. We had a ton, and this one was very fun because of that. Chiefy, Gee Pizza, Nosrak, Dylan, PH in there. I did this in like kind of like midweek, which is not usually when I do it. So it felt like we had like, I don't know, it felt like we actually kind of missed a bunch of people because I saw like people coming in at the end just being like, oh, I missed this. I would have really liked to help. Like our boy Mondo, he came in like after we kind of were already finished, but he actually suggested a bunch of stuff. Check out Lost Cards because, like I said, as always, we've got a bunch of extra stuff for that section. Lol, what Papa Dio in there also kind of later helping me out. Groove Chicken coming in. Beauregardin, loving it, coming in with some fun ideas there at the end. Pips Don't Lie, the usual suspects. I mean, we just had a blast brewing up this one, and there's a lot of cycling stuff that came to mind right away, but then there was a lot of fun, weird synergies that we also used. So good fun from the Discord. So, we've said hey and hello to our Discord helpers. That means it's time for the budget report. All right. So this one, not surprisingly, is not a ton. You can definitely shave this down. to where we're hitting like old school budget for Commander's Brew. But as we are right now, we're sitting at TCG, like mid is 136 ish, and the low is about $75. But obviously, this is how we do this. We're going to show you some stuff that you can cut right away. Fractured Identity is one of the more expensive cards of the deck. This is like not an essential card. Obviously, it's a cool card. It does a cool thing, but it's not something we absolutely need. So you can definitely save a couple bucks right there. Next.
Oh,
Sean,
yes.
this one,
Samut, Voice of Dissent. Is that expensive now? Yeah, we're up to like $6.
Yeah.
Samut. 3 red, green, Legendary Human Warrior. 3/4 Flash, Double Strike, Vigilance, Haste. Other creatures you control have Haste. That's why she's in this deck. White, tap, untap another target creature. There's the Zerda check there. Yeah, I was trying to think while you were talking, like I can't think of anything that gives the whole team haste that is a permanent with an activated ability, but here we go.
Yeah, so just off the top of my head, I remember a couple of them. So there's Samut here. There's another Samut Planeswalker that does the War of the Spark one.
Oh, yes.
There's Fires of Yavimaya, which is also
yes,
that has it too. And big thanks.
That's quite a few.
Yeah, big thanks to Papadillo for I was like at the last second kind of I was like looking to add these things in, and I just went to the Discord and was like, hey, is anyone around? Does anyone know any of these things? Because I didn't know what to search for to find it. Like it's hard to like find if things have activated abilities. And yeah, Papadillo was like, yeah, I brewed a deck with Zerda where I needed this also, so I had them off the top of my head. So that was very helpful.
Nice. I love the Discord team.
Oh, love the Discord team. So good. So yeah, Samut is in there. Here's where the deck is really gaining a lot of value, though. It's the Triomes. The Triomes are not like deadly expensive, but I've included all of them in this deck just because I wanted to see, where we're at with them when it comes to prices. And yeah, it turns out, there's some get up in the like $7 to $10 range. Others are more around like $5, but none of them are exactly what I would call cheap. So do we need to include the Triomes? They are great because this is a 5-color deck and they are cycling, so they are excellent. But we do not need to include them. We could easily just include our good old-fashioned tri-lands if you want. If you've got some slow fetches, those things work really well. Basically, it's nice to include a couple things that fetch. So, like, it's better to make more room almost for our basics, so our Evolving Wilds are even better, and our Terramorphic Expanses and stuff. So, yeah, I would definitely look at cutting the Triomes as opposed to, like, buying all of them for this deck. That's for sure. And of course, Sean, what's the card we would include if we had unlimited
scroll rack?
Yeah.
It was reprinted in Commander Legends, but that one's like $25. It's the 2-mana artifact, 1 and a tap. Exile any number of cards from your hand face down. Put that many cards from the top of your library in your hand. Then look at the exiled cards and put them on top in any order. So you swap your hand. Well, you swap some number of cards from your hand with cards from the top of your deck, and you put them in whatever order you want. What a great way to get Living In back in the library. You can even manipulate. I mean, in general, any deck that's cascading loves Scroll Rack. This deck only does one thing, so it doesn't matter how you rearrange, but it's nice to be able to rearrange that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and like we don't miss it too much because it's not super essential. It is nice, like you said, if we have a Living End in our hand, but there's also a little added application where if we're at the point where we have a lot of mana and maybe we have a bunch of lands in our hand, we can just like swap it up, see what we get, and like I said, like do a little shuffle effect to maybe just get rid of those lands that are sticking around in our hand, because that does tend to happen with cycling decks. Well, that's everything though. That's the deck. I mean, it's like I said, it's seems simple in what we're doing, but it's a lot of fun to play out. It's a lot of fun to actually play this one out and get it going. So yeah, try it out. Cody, Vociferous Codex. He's a fun commander and a fun new ability, and I think there's a lot of different ways to brew with him, and this is just one of them. So thanks for watching this one. Thanks for watching this deck. Check out Lost Cards coming out just a couple days after this one drops right here on Commander's Brew, but otherwise we'll see you next week with a brand new show.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. If you love what we're doing, consider supporting the show by going to patreon.com/commandersbrew.
And if you want to get any of the cards from our deck list, go to our TCGplayer affiliate link below.
That helps us out too, and for a free way to help us out, consider sharing the show with some friends. Like and subscribe, add a comment or two.
See you later.
Bye.